Today I will be talking about the film All the President's Men that was directed by Alan J. Pakula and released in 1976. This film is about the Watergate scandal and the reporters of the Washington Post investigating the scandal. First, I'll just give a general overview of the Watergate scandal since that is what this film focuses on. So the Watergate scandal began in the summer of 1972 during the re-election of the Republican President Nixon. It was found that the committee to re-elect Nixon broke into the office of the Democratic National Committee trying to bug the office as well as steal documents. Nixon, as well as others, denied this, and eventually Nixon was re-elected. Hush money was found to be paid to the robbers, and Nixon did interfere with this investigation that the FBI was conducting. After a lot of denial, but released information by the Washington Post, Nixon eventually does release the tapes that he recorded and does resign from office in 1974. The resignation of Nixon further disappointed the American people in the politics of the United States simply because they were overall disappointed by the Vietnam War as well as the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. So the corruption of President Nixon really just disappointed the American people further. Right. I'm just going to talk about what the movie's been based off of now, as well as the influence that actor Robert Redford had on the film. So All the President's Men is based off of the book All the President's Men that was written by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein in 1974. It is said that they only committed in writing the full book after actor Robert Redford said he would buy the film rights. The big difference in the film and the book is that the film only follows the 7 months that follow the Watergate scandal, while the book focuses on a lengthier period of time. It was Redford that influenced the movie's plot to focus on the reports and ongoing investigations of Watergate, rather than solely the events that occurred at that time and the general facts of what went down in the corruption of the White House. Bernstein and Woodward had already started to write the story about Nixon and the involvement of the White House until receiving a phone call from Redford that stated that they were the story that should be focused on. Redford went on to hire William Goldman as the screenwriter, and it was Redford that then produced the film under his company Wildwood Enterprises. He went on to hire Alan Pakula as the director, and so the movie opens with the infamous Watergate break-in and the assignment to the then low-profile story to Bob Woodward. Another reporter, Carl Bernstein, partners with him as the two young, inexperienced reporters discover this was much more than a simple break-in and unfold the entirety of the Watergate scandal and figure out those that were involved. Their methods and strategies that ultimately led to the resignation of President Nixon has been said to be some of the best reports in history and is still praised today by journalists. Alright, so discussing the impact that All the President's Men had on the general public and their knowledge of the Watergate scandal. So it allowed the Watergate scandal become more remote to the general public. It showed the corruption of the individuals involved rather than simply being arrogant politicians. And in doing this, it allowed the American people to remove any guilt that they may have had in voting for someone like Nixon, who really took advantage of the power that was given to them. There is even one point in the film that mentions, after releasing the headliner story, that before, very few people had paid any attention to the Watergate robberies. This film allowed viewers to see the details and complexity of the corruption in the White House and understand the power and secrecy that it possesses. Follow the money was also a phrase that is commonly associated with Watergate, and it was actually introduced in this movie, which really showed the impact Hollywood has on history and the memories that are formed based off of Hollywood productions. This film also had a large effect on the trust the public had on media and journalism in general. It really gave the public reassurance that reporters were trustworthy and had their best interests at heart. It showed reporters as heroes and people that produce accurate reports on matters at hand. There's something that came out that said after the movie was released, 70% of people trusted the media and believed that what they were printing was accurate and helpful, compared to just 50% today. This film was distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures. It is rumored that Warner Brothers were the ones that insisted Redford star in the movie, but not everyone believes this claim that was made by Redford himself. It was released in theaters on April 6, 1976, and grossed $70.6 million at the box office. All the President's Men went on to win 4 Academy Awards: Best Supporting Actor, Best Screenplay, Adaptation, Best Art Direction, and Best Sound. Reviewers such as Roger Ebert gave the film 3.5 out of 4 stars in the year it was released. He states that too much focus is on the details rather than results. However, goes on to give credit to director Pakula in keeping the suspense despite the audience knowing the ending. He goes on to discuss the accurate portrayal of exhilaration and paranoia associated with the investigation by the 2 reporters. The biggest credit due is the momentum that carries on throughout the film, and simple scenes of getting doors slammed in Bernstein and Woodward's faces, and them simply just writing on their typewriter. Hollywood Reporter stated, "It's like building a giant jigsaw puzzle, with the added frustration of first having to find the pieces before trying to find where they fit in the overall picture." Hollywood Reporter goes on to praise Goldman and his perfectly timing of fear and suspense that was built into the film. After discussing the reviews and the praise that this film had for the momentum that was kept and the suspense that was constant throughout the film, I'd just like to talk about the strategies that were used to tell the story of this film and keep the narrative going. I really wanted to show the first scene of this film, however I was unable to insert it, so I will put the link below, but I'll just go ahead and describe that scene. So the opening is, you see only a sheet of paper. It's so close that you can barely tell what it is until abruptly the typewriter hits it and types out June 1st, 1972. This, personally, after watching it the first time, the sound was so abrupt and powerful that it scared me. By using this as the introduction, it sets the date of what was happening and also the tone. Throughout the film, the viewer is discovering what is going on by reading what is being typed on the typewriter through newspaper headlines and general news story clips. It was Redford's desire to focus on the press and all the President's Men, and it was the writer Goldman that was able to show the power of press in journalism. He wrote this as if reporters were heroes. The powerful typewriter, I think, was able to set the tone of the power of words and press early on this film, as well as show to the viewer that this is how a lot of the story was going to be told. The next part of the opening scene is a news clip of Nixon arriving at the White House in a helicopter, and you see him entering the House of Congress, and you hear a narration of them discussing the relationships that he has with all these men. You know, there's 535 men in that room, and you see him shaking hands with everyone, and just hear how he is about to speak to the Congress in general. I'd just like to mention that news clips were used a lot in this film, and a lot of points of interest. There's a TV shown with the news playing, whether it be of Nixon's re-election or perhaps Nixon denying any accusations that have been made, while you see Woodward and Bernstein in the background just typing away the story of what's happening. This keeps the narration very smooth and also informs the audience of what was happening at the time of a specific discovery of the Watergate scandal. In this scene specifically, I think the video was able to express how many men make up all the President's Men. It shows the countless relationships in this brief clip and sets up the mystery of really who could have been involved in this Watergate scandal and the endless possibilities of who could have been. By showing the small clip, the movie was able to build the suspense by using the knowledge that the audience already has. And just in general terms, I'd like to talk about how Pakula was able to keep the momentum going throughout this film, despite most of it being Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward just sitting at their desk typing or on phone calls. He really was able to keep the scenes fast-paced by the music and also the use of shadows. You can see in this picture here on the slide of one of the scenes of them trying to figure out information from an anonymous source. The whole time they're speaking to this source, you can barely see the face. The shadows are constant throughout the film to make sure that it has a sense of mystery to it, which really leads the audience to keep wanting more and to watch more. I'd just like to thank you for listening to this presentation on All the President's Men, and I hope you learned a few facts about not only the Watergate scandal, but how this film in general just had an impact on American history itself.